Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsor.
How big can I get my heart to be?
Thought Media Network proudly presents
How much love can I get flowing out of me?
The Real Talk Sisters. Deep, unfiltered, soulful conversations with Reverend Dr. Pjae Stanley, Reverend Kim Andrews, and Reverend Melinda Wood Allen.
How big can I get my heart to be?
Join us for Real Talk on Real Issues, Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Central, 1 o'clock Mountain. And now, let's join the Real Talk Sisters.
How big can I get my heart to be?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Real Talk Sisters. My name is Kim Andrews, and I'm spiritual leader at Unity Saxe in Saxe, Texas. And I am flying solo today. Reverend Pjae, who is the spiritual leader at Harmony Spiritual Center out in Fort Worth, Texas, is in Thailand for the next 2 weeks. So she's going to miss today and next Tuesday. And Melinda, Reverend Melinda Wood Allen, who is at Church of One Love in Dallas, Texas, she is taking care of family. Her husband had surgery yesterday. He is doing well. He's recuperating well. And she has taken time off to be with him and to hopefully get some rest and relaxation herself for a little bit. So today we're talking about the stories that we tell, the stories of our lives. I believe that our life is a series of stories. And maybe you could look at it as one story, as our lives being a book. And then the things that we go through or the seasons that we experience in our lives, if we think of them as chapters or volumes, some of us do a lot of living, so it may be more than just one book. Perhaps a season of your life can be a book in itself. And you start with volume 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you move on. So it's interesting as we go through our lives, the stories we tell ourselves about what's occurring, what we're experiencing, what we love, what we don't love. Perhaps those stories are wrapped around specific relationships. I often think of the beginning of my story with my family, with my immediate family growing up in New Jersey. I had 2 siblings, an older sister and a younger brother, and my mother and father. So my young life, I think of as a story up until the time that I left home at the age of 19 and moved out and was on my own. And then there were my 20s, that carefree life where you're just kind of living on the edge, I would say, because you think you're bulletproof, and at least I did. And I was having a good time. I had my friends. Gosh, we went out dancing a lot, having a good time. And there wasn't a whole lot of thought about life itself and what I'm experiencing and the patterns that I have. I didn't have any thoughts of things like that in my 20s. It was probably my 30s when I really started to notice the patterns and where am I, and thoughts about am I happy, and where am I going with this, and what about getting older. It was in my 40s that I started to really deepen my spirituality. Actually, that's when I discovered spirituality, where I walked away from organized religion and started searching for something that spoke more deeply to my heart, something that resonated with me, something that encompassed my whole life and not just an hour, hour and a half on Sunday mornings. And then, of course, the 50s, and now I'm 65. So I noticed these chapters and these changes and this ebb and flow of my life over those decades. And there were some stories that I told myself, not all that served me well. And that'll be the first part of our discussion today. one of the most salient stories that I told for a very long time, decades, decades, I told that story, was I was in high school and was really good in math. And is my best subject. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I definitely was a super nerd in school. And we had a geometry test. And I love geometry. I mean, it just made sense to me. And I think I was the only one in the class that felt that way and had that experience, and especially had a love for the subject. So we had a particularly difficult test, and I scored a 98. Everybody else in class, I think, scored a 75 or below. So in that moment, I wasn't real popular because I just ruined the bell curve. I really did. But the teacher made a big deal of recognizing me for that 98 score. And uh, I remember that class. It was almost like the teacher and I had this one-on-one conversation the entire time, because no one was either interested or understood it really. And every time she asked a question, it was, it was my hand that went up. And if she couldn't get anybody else to answer a question, then she would call on me and I would get it. And I did love it. It really was fun. So I got a 98 on this test, and I really was just proud of myself. She was very proud of myself. My friends were proud of me, those who weren't mad about the bell curve being ruined. And I kind of floated home, and my parents were very big on education. My father was very much into excellence, and he wanted us to strive for excellence. That was often the conversation in my home. And I brought home my paper. My father came home from work a couple of hours later, and I just ran up to him at the door and I said, "Look, I got a 98, and the teacher had written very good on it, and said she was proud." I think that was another note on the sheet. And standing there with my father, and he looked at it and he said, "What happened to the other 2 points?" And he tossed the paper down on the table, and he looked at me, and the the look on his face was just disappointment. Well, to say that he ripped the sails off my sailboat is an understatement. I think I was speechless for a time because I hadn't thought about the other 2 points. I just knew I got a 98. And man, I suffered from that moment in time for many years. And the message that I got, the story I made up from that occurrence, was that I wasn't good enough and I wasn't going to be good enough. Now, mind you, these are not words my father said. All he did was display that look of disappointment and look real frustrated that I hadn't gotten 100. But yes, I was thinking that I was never going to measure up. I was already a perfectionist, a diehard perfectionist. So, now I'm really feeling it. Yeah, where were those 2 points, Kim? That's what I'm saying in my head. And why couldn't you be perfect? Why couldn't you have gotten 100? And what did you miss? And I remember looking at that paper again and looking at that one problem. And I told that story of that encounter with my father over and over and over again for decades. Literally, I know I was living here, so I was at least in my 50s. And one day I heard myself telling that story out loud again to someone else in conversation. And I thought in my head, why are you still telling this story? And how does it serve me? And how about if I just stop telling the story? I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know how to reframe that experience in my head yet, because I was still stuck in this unworthiness and knowing that I wasn't perfect. So I just resolved to stop telling the story. And I did. Even when I was in conversations and knew that I wanted to tell the story, I could hear the story. It was almost like I could taste that story in my mouth. And at any moment, it was going to come pass through these lips, and I was going to share that story again. And I remember thinking in my head during those times, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Don't tell the story. Just let it sit. Let it sit. And maybe it'll fade into the distance. Maybe it will fade into the past. So I don't know how long it was that I just stayed in contemplation about that story and why it was so important to me, and why I let that be a central story of my life. Because that feeling of unworthiness plagued me. It was, to say it was central in my life is probably another understatement. It defined who I was. And it was the reason why I ran from some really sweet opportunities in my 20s and 30s and 40s. It was the reason why I didn't take risks, because I knew I couldn't be perfect. And you know what? Perfection, this striving to not make mistakes, to deny our humanity and the fact that we're never 100% at something when we first try it, because we are learning, and there's a learning curve generally with most things. So I was in complete denial about all that through those decades, and I played small through my 20s, 30s, and 40s because of that story. And I kept reinforcing it in my life every single time I told it. And so I needed to not tell it for a while, and to see how I showed up without the story, and who I was without the story. And sitting in the absence of it felt uncomfortable at first, because now I have to think about, now what do I say to myself when there's an opportunity? What do I say to myself when there's a risk that I could take? What then, Kim? And who am I? Who is Kim Andrews without the story? And in my 40s, I did have a daily meditation practice. So I was asking in meditation time, who am I? And who am I without the story of unworthiness and the story about not being perfect? And slowly but surely, I started to build a self-worth that was based on my divinity, that was based on some very solid ground, some principles and values uh, that I really thought about and started to live, and principles and values that governed my life and my relationships. So I knew that I was standing on something other than the grade on a test and those missing 2 points. And I stopped telling the story. And then I was standing in a new kind of power. And I was standing in a place of discovery and curiosity about who I am at different times when different opportunities presented themselves. And I was able to create who I wanted to be in those moments without the story. I was able to try some things and see what might work. I was able to go to plan A, try plan A, and if it didn't work, I just said, oh, okay, that didn't work. I'm probably one step closer to something that does work. And then I'd go to plan B. And if plan B didn't work, I didn't worry about it. I'd go to plan C and so on until I really hit something that worked for that opportunity or that risk or that space and time when I get to choose who I am. And I believe in every moment we get to choose who we are. And I believe that in itself is perfection. The word perfect really just means, the root of the word perfect just means wholeness. And I know as a powerful, divine, spiritual being that I am whole, perfect, and complete. I am the essence of goodness, of the good, the all good, which I sometimes call God, the all good. So that, I stepped out of this one story that didn't serve me and got quiet, got to sit in my life without the story, and then created something else. And I'm surprised at the opportunities that I said yes to and the risks that I was willing to take. And, sometimes the mistakes hurt. You bump your head on a brick wall and, it's like that. Sometimes those brick walls are thick and hard. And so it wasn't always pretty, but I was in a much different place. I was in a place of power and in a place of creation. And that's an exciting place to be. And, if I got a little roughed up in the process, then I learned something. I gained a new insight, learned something new about myself and about what my life could be, and move forward. So the stories we tell, that was one of my big ones. And I suspect that as you listen to this, you probably have some stories too. Some things that you've been telling yourself perhaps for a very long time and didn't realize it was a story, didn't realize that it was something you were repeating. And of course, I had made it so much bigger than it really was. It was a single test score. It was a 98. Yay. I mean, I am proud of that 98 right now, and will continue to be. And the other 2 points don't matter. They just don't matter. And now I get to, like I said, create new stories. I started to pay attention to other stories I was telling, and some of those stories had created patterns in my life. They certainly did with relationships. As I worked with relationships and tried to find my way, find myself, and how to hold who I am in a relationship with another person, whether they were friendships or an intimate relationship with a significant other, I started to be in a place of creation there. Because there were stories that I needed to drop about who I was in relationship with other people. And some of that was based off of that same feeling of unworthiness that I had, and needed to discover something new about myself, needed to be in a place of curiosity in relationship. And I did notice that over time, my relationships got better and better. They weren't perfect. But they got better and better as I got better and better. And I started to tell different stories, started to tell stories about myself from a place of empowerment and from a place of goodness, and based upon my divinity and a true self-worth that no one else could take from me, that had nothing to do with a circumstance, a grade on a paper, something I did or did not do at work or execute very well. Because real self-worth is something that you carry with you, and nothing outside of you can shake it or take it from you. So on that note, let's take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more about the stories we tell. Welcome back. We're talking about the stories that we tell. And I want to start this segment off with a reading from the book Communion with God by Neale Donald Walsch, one of my favorite books and favorite series. And this is a part of the Conversations with God series. And also, after Conversations with God, I think it was books 1, 2, and 3. Then the next book was Friendship with God. And then now this one, Communion with God. So this is from chapter 16, Recreating Your Reality. And if you're not familiar with this series of books, Neale Donald Walsch is a man who had an experience, was really having a hard time in life, and just started asking some questions out loud of God about what was happening to his life and why he was struggling so much. And he started having a conversation with God. He would put out a question and he would get an answer. And hence the title, Conversations with God. So this is God talking about recreating our reality. As you journey to eternity, as you move to mastery, you will find yourself confronted with many circumstances, situations, and developments in your life, some of which you may call unwelcome. The first thing that most people do in such moments is the last thing that you should do, which is to try to figure out what it all means. Some people think that things happen for a reason, and so they try to discern what that reason is. Others say that certain things are a sign, so they try to understand what the sign is telling them. In one way or another, people try to find meaning in the events and experiences in their lives. Yet the fact is that nothing has any meaning at all. There is no intrinsic truth hidden in the encounters and experiences of life. Who would hide it there, and why? If it were there for you to discover, wouldn't it be much more efficient to make it obvious? If God had something to tell you, wouldn't it be a lot easier to say nothing, or kinder, to simply tell you rather than to make it a mystery that you had to solve? The fact is, there is no meaning to anything, save the meaning you give it. Life is meaningless. Man, that hit me between the eyes when I first read that. That is difficult for many humans to accept, yet it is my greatest gift. By rendering life meaningless, I give you the opportunity to decide what anything and everything means. Out of your decisions, will you define yourself in relationship to anything and everything in life? That is, in fact, the means by which you experience who you choose to be. And who you choose to be is in caps. This is the act of self-creation, of recreating yourself anew in the grandest version of the greatest vision you ever held about who you are. So when a particular thing happens to you, don't ask yourself why it is happening. Choose why it is happening. Decide why it is happening. If you can't choose or decide with intention, then make it all up. You are anyway. You are making up all the reasons for doing things or for why things are happening the way they are. Yet most of the time you're doing this unconsciously. Now make up your mind and your life consciously. Do not search for life's meaning or the meaning of any particular event, occurrence, or circumstance. Give it its meaning. Then announce and declare, express and experience, fulfill, and become who you choose to be in relationship to it. Oh my gosh. If you are a keen observer, you will notice that you keep bringing yourself the same situation or circumstance over and over again in your life until you recreate yourself anew. This is the journey to mastery. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. I love that. Life is meaningless, and I've heard this before, that there is no good or bad. Life isn't fair, nor is it unfair. It just is. Things just happen. And I find this freeing, that life is meaningless. In fact, like I said in the beginning, it kind of punched me in the gut. It was a shock. Life is meaningless. And it doesn't mean that there isn't meaning to life, but it's here God is saying that we get to assign that meaning. I got to assign the meaning of that test, of my father's words. I got to assign what it meant as far as I am concerned, about who I choose to be. I love this phrase. Where is it? The greatest version, the grandest version of the greatest vision you have ever held about who you are. The grandest version of the greatest vision you ever held about who you are. So, in the face of things that happen, how about choosing what that means to you and your life and how you're going to carry it forward? That makes me excited and actually gives me some peace about some things I'm dealing with right now. And it lets me know that I don't have to be a victim. I don't have to be subjected to anything, oppressed by anything, denigrated by anything. I get to choose no matter what comes at me or whatever I think is coming for me. So what could that paper have meant? Could have just been a paper and meant nothing. Could have been, I just got a 98. I knew the subject matter well, and I did, 98 out of 100. Who cares about the 2 points? Could have just been a paper. And when my father said what he did and asked about those 2 points, I could have let it all go there. But you know, at that time, I was in my teens. And of course, very subject to my environment, my birth circumstances, my family, the context, the environment in which I lived those first 20 years. And because I viewed my father as such a taskmaster, I was always seeking his approval. And man, when I didn't get it in that moment, that's truly what ripped the sails off my sailboat. It wasn't him, because I do believe now that he was really getting me to think about what might have happened. And if I could get a 98, why couldn't I get 100? Could have just been an honest question. But that's not where I was in life at the time. And that's not where I was in my relationship with him at the time. And it wasn't, I was probably in my 30s before I stopped seeking his approval. And I mean, I left home at 19. So for another 10 years or so, I'm still seeking his approval, even though I'm not living under his roof. So it could have just been a test and meant nothing to my self-worth. Or it could have just meant that I was a very, very good student, and I was. I was a hard worker. I wanted good grades. I prided myself on good grades. It was important to me. I do like competing against myself. And I could have just said, "Good job, Kim," and kept going. That could have been a feather in my cap instead of a punch in the gut. So that could have been the meaning I assigned to that very story. And there could have been others. You know, there's a billion possibilities in life when we have a story. And I let it go. And now, as I'm telling it today, it feels so much different now when I tell it. You know, I don't have the catch in my throat. And if there is any, it's because I love my father dearly and always have. And I know he was trying his best. And I know he saw something in me that I didn't always see in myself. And I know he wanted the best for me. Did he always say it in a way that I could hear it and understand it and know it as that? No, but he didn't know that. He was pushing me probably the way he had been pushed by his parents. Education has always been important in my family. So he's probably was just doing what he knew to do and wanted his daughter to do well. And really, I think wanted me to be the best. And I love him for it. I really do. So, yeah, I feel some emotion around that right now because I do love my father dearly and I know he loved me. And we had a great relationship over the decades. He and I grew together in a way that just surpassed my imagination. And now that he's no longer on this physical plane, he is still one of my guides and one of my mentors in life. And I hear him speaking to me at times when I truly need him. And I hear his affirmation and feel his love for me, even to this day. So, yes, that. So, what stories are you telling? I want you to think about that. Maybe if you journal, maybe you want to journal about that. Start to listen to yourself as you are having conversations. And what are the stories that you are telling over and over again? And how do you feel in the midst of telling the story? So if you're feeling that burning in your chest, often when I was in bad situations, I would feel this burning, in my upper chest, and some discomfort. And knowing then that I was in the midst of some toxicity, that I was often creating myself because I was repeating the story. And in the story, I was bringing back the feelings of the circumstance and often enhancing, and those feelings were growing exponentially within me every single time I taught him. I told those stories. So I was back in that time frame again, almost like traveling back in time. And it, those stories were not serving me. So notice the stories you're telling. Notice how you feel in the stories themselves. Allow yourself to feel what it is that's coming up as you're telling the story, and let that feeling roll so that you can release it from your system, from your heart, your body, your mind, and your soul. And do that as often as you need to do it. So if you need to tell yourself that again, over and over again, until you've released all that emotion, give yourself that gift and let that emotion come through so that it's gone. And you can heal at that level, at a very deep level. And then you have no need to tell the story again. Once you're clear, then you are then in the midst of a time of creation where you can start to think about, who am I now without the story? Who am I without the story? Who could I be? Let your imagination run wild. Perhaps now you want to start reframing that story, but reframe it from a place of power and a place of peace and a place of love for yourself and of whoever else may have been in that story with you. Like I said, I, had a much different relationship with my father in my 50s and 60s, and I still do have a wonderful relationship with him, even though he's not here physically anymore. So you know what, we have a different relationship when I was willing to let go of that story and my feeling of resentment that he had done something to me when I don't think he was trying to do anything to me purposefully. So maybe there's some forgiveness work that you need to do around that. We did talk about forgiveness in the last couple of weeks here on the Real Talk Sisters. So maybe there's some forgiveness work you need to do, forgiving yourself or forgiving someone else that was involved in that circumstance, in that story that you have. And then create something new. Sometimes I ask in my meditation time, in my prayer time, I ask the universe, what's possible? Inspire me, surprise me with something. And, in unity, we believe that there are the 12 powers of man, those divine powers, and one of them is imagination. And that there are billions and billions of possibilities for us always in any moment. So as you start to create who you are and who the grandest version of the greatest vision of who you choose to be, I love the word grand and great in this phrase. What is that? And who can you be in the next moment? Who can you be in this current chapter of your life? Who do you choose to be in the next chapter of your life? And what do you want to model for other people? How do you want to inspire others? What kind of legacy do you want to leave around this particular circumstance or theme of your life? That's very exciting. And when we're in the process of co-creating, we are in a place of power. God is the ultimate creator, and so are we. And it's thrilling to think that we get to choose who we are, the grandest version of the greatest vision of who we are, who we can be, who we choose to be in any given moment. So, stories. Oh, what are some of the other stories I have told myself? Some of them in relationships with that I needed somebody to make me feel complete, and that my happiness came from outside of me. So in a lot of relationships, yes, still in my 30s and 40s, as I was healing from those feelings of unworthiness, I was seeking out unworthiness outside of me. And if someone I was dating was angry at me, or we had had some words or misunderstanding, then I wasn't good. And I wasn't feeling good about me. And often I was blaming myself. Sure, when we are in relationship, we always have a hand in some way in what is happening. But it doesn't have to knock you down. I believe that when we are in a place of power, when we truly know who we are, and that is based on something that is not subject to what's happening outside of us, we're just like a mighty oak in a storm, and we kind of bend in the wind in the storm, and then we come back upright. And then perhaps there's a strong wind and it shakes some of our leaves off, or we start dropping fruit, and but we don't come unrooted, and we don't lose ourselves in the circumstance or in the relationship. So I had to start telling different stories about who I am, and that I am whole, perfect, and complete in the midst of relationship with other people. And again, in friendships with folks and in intimate relationships with significant others. And then that way we don't lose ourselves. And yes, as I started to build this new self-worth and it got stronger and deeper, then yeah, the relationships got better. They were more joyful, they were more life affirming, they were more fun. I felt more freedom in them. And, they didn't all last, but I ended up now in a very satisfying, fulfilling, joyful, peaceful, loving marriage, and in which I feel so much freedom. But I couldn't have manifested that if I hadn't been that already, if I hadn't already been loving and told myself that story, that I created that story. I, in fact, created an avatar of myself that was loving and peaceful and calm and strong and resilient and a gift to someone else in my life, someone with something deep and valuable to share. That was my new story in relationships. And yes, it made the relationships I was in better. And I was attracted to a different kind of person. And it was wonderful to watch. And even in the time when those relationships ended, they weren't nearly as messy. I rebounded more quickly. I knew that I could grieve the loss of that relationship and that I was still whole. There was no part of me that was now missing. There may have been some lessons I needed to learn. There may have been something else that I needed to sit with. Maybe there was some forgiveness work for myself or for the other person, but I wasn't lost, but I didn't feel devastated. Uh, my heart might have been broken, but I wasn't devastated. And then I was able to learn the lessons I needed to learn and then come into the next relationship, whenever that was, as with a new reality, with a new sense of me, a stronger, deeper sense of me that called out to someone who was perhaps more loving, more comfortable in their own skin, more emotionally mature, not terrified of commitment and seeing me as a ball and chain. Ooh, there were those days. So when we're willing to change our stories, when we're really willing to look at those stories and how they're affecting us, then we can make a change. And then we can change our reality of life and create a new, wonderful, exciting story. Let's take a break and then we'll wrap up in the last 15 minutes or so. See you in a bit.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center, Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Oh, we got a few comments here. Oh, someone said thank you. Naomi, thank you for being here. And Rick Horsey, what a gift to hear from you. Oh, thank you for being here. That's wonderful. I love you too. So yes, stories, the stories of our lives. So no matter where you are in life right now, we get to choose. Again, we are always at choice in every single moment. And that choice can be the choice of a new story. So as we go into story, it doesn't necessarily have to be about a full chapter of our lives or a full season of our lives. It can be just about this particular moment in time. So it was interesting that I didn't create any stories about what would happen here on the show by myself today. I very much miss my sisters, Melinda and Pjae, and we do have this great energy together. So yesterday when I realized that I was probably going to do the show by myself, and I did attempt to find someone that I could sit and interview or have a conversation with here on the show today, and that didn't work out. And in that moment, and this shows I've really grown, and I have more curiosity than fear about what's next. I just kind of said, okay, I'm going to be by myself tomorrow. And what does that mean? What meaning am I going to assign to this experience coming up tomorrow? And I decided not to assign anything to it. I thought, okay, on Sunday mornings, I do a 20, 25-minute, sometimes 30-minute message. And so this would be like doing 2 of them. Lord knows I can talk a blue streak. But I was just open to what could happen. And I do have a deep trust in my relationship with the universe, with God. And I know that I am always expressing as the divine. I always know that I am a part of, an integral part of the absolute realm of God consciousness. And so there are all of these ideas, endless ideas, infinite ideas in the universe, and to which I have access to. And so I knew that, yes, there will be an hour's worth of content that can just come through me here in this moment about story. And I had a knowingness, and I still do here in these last 15 minutes, that whatever is going to come through will be what people need to hear. It's taken me 65 years to get to this place. Actually, maybe just 58, because I started in ministry in 2018. And I knew when I started in ministry that I just said yes. I didn't know what to expect because I'd never been in ministry before. And I knew since I was called to this that there was some kind of message that spirit, that the universe wanted me to express every single Sunday, 52 weeks out of the year. I love public speaking, but I could not imagine creating 52 talks every year by myself. But I knew I didn't have to do that. I knew that when I embrace fully who I am as a spiritual being, that I have access to this energy that is God, these infinite number of ideas. And it is from that that I stepped into ministry. It is from that that I stepped into this conversation today, knowing that I could be here by myself in this hour and create something here with my own energy. I know my sisters are with me, and I know they love me, and I'm thinking of them today. And I knew that I would be okay. 10 years ago, I probably would not have said yes to this moment. 10 years ago, this probably would have been one of the opportunities or a risk that I would have walked away from. At that time, we always, even when I was that teenager facing my father with that 98 on that paper, I was a powerful spiritual being. I just didn't know it. I'd never been told that. That wasn't my part of my frame of reference from the religion that I grew up in. And so I was always that. I know that now, but I didn't know that myself. I didn't have that understanding of who I am, and I didn't have that understanding of God. So I'm living out a new expression right here and now in this time with you. And gosh, it's just kind of washing over me that this is a new level of expression for me. And I'm having some emotion about it right now. And that's wonderful. because now I'm the poster child of, that we get to choose to be and choose a new story in a moment. So if you look up stories we can tell and imaginative stories or something like that in a dictionary, there'll be my picture right there next to the definition. And that means if I can do it, you can do it. Because there, like I said, there certainly were times when this would not have been possible, and this would not have been something I would have done. And I invite you truly to think about what is the grandest version of the greatest vision of who you are, and to let your imagination go wild and to create a story that you would not have told years ago, months ago, weeks ago, or that you would not have told when you first got up this morning. In this next moment, you can choose and create a story, a version of you that you would not have conceived of when you first opened your eyes this morning. And you can choose to be anything that your wild imagination can conceive of, and then believe it, and then to give thanks for it and to celebrate it. Let your imaginations go wild. And with these stories that you've had for years, decades, however long, challenge yourself. Give yourself the gift of reframing some of those stories, or simply let them go. Simply let go of the story. Simply refuse to say it out loud again, and to free yourself from all of the emotion that goes with it, all of the condemnation that perhaps is attached to it, all of the feelings of unworthiness or shame or disappointment or sadness or whatever it is that you feel around those stories that are not serving you. Let it all go. Emotion, as we've probably have said on this show before, is merely energy, and it'll move through you as you release it, and then you have a clarity. Then you have space to create something new. You have space then to create a new story that can take you to places you've never been. And I am certainly going to use this hour with you as the springboard for something new. I have some new work that I'm being called to and have been called to, and I've been dragging my feet about it because I did, past tense, have a story about that. And today I'm going to give myself the gift of creating a new story, a thrilling, exciting, colorful story about what that can be and what I can be, to create the grandest version of the greatest vision of who I choose to be from this moment on. I think it is a gift we give ourselves if we will just be open. And what I know about life now is that all we have to do is crack the door open a little bit to spirit, to the universe, to God, to the all good and unimaginable light can seep through that crack and change your life. If you'll say yes, if you'll say yes, and if you'll be willing and grateful for the choice, for the opportunity to choose, and for the gift of imagination, and for the gift of new life. Sunday was just Easter Sunday, and we celebrated the resurrection, and that was new life, and that was a new story, not just for Jesus, our way shower, our brother, but for all of us. He modeled for us what the new reality could be. He modeled for us dying to something old, to a previous experience, and being able to step into something new. And yes, there were those days in the tomb that were necessary before the rising. Allow yourself the time in the tomb. Allow yourself the time to marinate, percolate, to let go, to fully die to something, to fully let go of something. And then that stone gets rolled away and you get to step into a new experience, a new version, a new ministry. And I believe we all have a ministry. It's a way that we serve the world, something that only we can do the way that we do it based upon the gift that we are. So we can have a rising every single day. We can have a rising every single moment. And I am inviting you, I would say challenge, but it's an invitation, to be in a place of curiosity for your life, to be in a place of discovery for your life, to truly let go of the old stories. It is valuable to sit with them for a little bit and know what they are. Know that you're going to do something with them. Like I said, to know the story, stop saying it. Let yourself discover who you are without the story. To let go of the emotion. To forgive yourself or someone else if need be. And to then be in a place of clarity and discovery. And to step forward into something new. To give yourself time to imagine what's possible. And I have one of those rubber bracelets on my arm today, and it says, anything is possible. Anything is possible. And you get to decide what that is. You get to decide what the new version of you is. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited for you, and I am excited about the world and the gift that you will give the world in this new version. You've already been given gifts. You are already sharing them with the world, and now you get to step into a new expression of that from a place of empowerment and goodness and the ultimate worthiness, which is our divinity and our blessed humanity. We are truly incredible, magnificent human beings. And when we live from that magnificence, magnificent things happen, and we get to change the world. So I send lots of love to my sisters, Melinda and Pjae. I know that you are doing your perfect work right now, wherever you are. And my prayers and my thoughts are with you both. Thank you to everybody who has been here. When are we coming back? We will be back next Tuesday, which is today's the 2nd, so that is the 9th of April. If you go to realtalksisters.com, you'll see the link to our playlist, and you can also then get the link so that you know where we are every Tuesday. So it's every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central here on New Thought Media. Thank you very much. This has just been an honor and a deep pleasure and a joy. Take care. Namaste.